of the lesson, you should be able to identify the best CPU and RAM in use today. Compare PCI, AGP, and PCI Express. Interpret motherboard specifications and distinguish between FireWire and USB 2.0. Hi there, and welcome back to our series on hardware and software. In our previous lesson, we learned about the form factor of a motherboard and its case. In this lesson, Zamo and Morwa will be looking at sockets, slots, and ports on the motherboard and how you can connect things like CPUs, RAM, and devices, like a camera. Hey guys!
Hi, Murray. Murray, what's the make of the PC Zamo's dad gave us? Was it an Acer, Celeron, Pentium, or a Mesa?
That's not how it works. Anyway, we'd better put these away.
Yeah, you're quite right. Computers and liquids, they don't mix, huh?
Zamo, what do you mean that's not how it works?
Well, what Zamo means is that you get companies that put CPUs and motherboards together, yes, and some companies that take all those components and put their name on it.
Oh, now I'm even more confused.
For example, Intel makes Centrino, Atom, Pentium, and Celeron CPUs, and AMD makes Athlon and Phenom CPUs. On the other hand, MSI makes some of its motherboards for Intel and AMD CPUs, and another company called Foxconn does exactly the same. Some companies make CPUs and motherboards, but companies like Acer, Mesa, Dell, and Proline, they put computers together. So companies like that, they buy the components from other manufacturers.
So if you buy a computer without a name on the box, it probably means the guy at the computer shop built it himself.
And that's what's so great about building your own computer. You get to choose the modules and components that you want.
And the bonus is young people like us can start our own business and sell custom-made computers with our name on the box. Modular design.
What would we do without it? Well, I think it's time to leave you guys on your own. I'm out of here. I'll see you later.
Well, let's get started.
Hey, somebody's broken the CPU.
No, man, don't worry. Gamers take this off all the time so that they can add in their own cooling components. Remember how I told you how much they love to overclock their processors? All we have to do is put it back on. Then use a special substance called thermal paste. This helps to conduct the heat away from the CPU onto the heatsink, and then the fan blows the heat away.
Oh, but why does one of these corners look a bit different?
This CPU is square. Now, as each CPU fits into the socket in a particular way, this notch tells us which way it must go in. You also get CPUs that come on cards, and we call the place that they connect to a slot, like a PCI slot holds a card.
Those bumpy things look very small, hey? Won't they get damaged when you try to put it in?
Well, all CPU sockets are ZIF sockets, spelled Z-I-F. That stands for Zero Insertion Force. So all you do is lower it down with the notch in the right place, and then you bring this little lever down, and you get even force all around.
Can I try and do it?
Yeah, sure. But just remember, if you're using force, you're doing it wrong.
Okay. Ouch! That lever pinched me. So much for zero force.
Oh no. This CPU is made by Intel. And look, our heatsink is round. No, the heatsink for an AMD is meant to be square. And this won't work on our motherboard.
Well, in this case, it's 0 marks for Zamo, unfortunately. It's not about the heatsink. The socket number tells you how many pins it has. There must be the same number of contact points with the same distance between them on the CPU. So, look for something like socket LGA775 on the CPU and on the motherboard description. That means it's got 775 pins, and they've all got to meet up with the right contact. The funny thing is, as the pins are on the motherboard, it's actually the CPU, which is the socket. The early CPUs did have pins with holes in the sockets. Those were called PGA. But A common fault was that the pins would get bent by using too much force trying to plug the CPU into the motherboard. And since CPUs often cost more than motherboards, the manufacturers decided to put the pins onto the motherboards and get rid of the holes. Instead, the pins have springs that push against the CPU. They call this the LGA, or Land Grid Array.
They say the CPU is the computer's brain, but this computer's only a half-brained PC.
Hey!
What about the memory part?
Quit insulting my machine. Anyway, I've checked the RAM that we're going to use, and the pins are perfect for this machine. And more importantly, it runs at the correct speed for our chipset to handle. This RAM will have to do for now. We can always upgrade it later, huh?
That's very clever, hey? But how do we get the RAM onto the motherboard? Thermal paste?
Wow, sometimes I really wonder about you. It's easy. You just slot the DIMM module into the DIMM slot.
So, do you just buy a DIMM module and slot it in?
Well, all you have to do is check the speed at which your motherboard runs, and then the pins will be correct. The CPU and operating system also have a say, but that's for another day.
Oh no, I knew it would get complicated.
So, what's dual channel architecture? It sounds like 2 tunnels.
At this point, I must come in, because there are 1 or 2 things that Zamu forgot to mention. SDRAM is older RAM technology. DDR SDRAM is double data rate SDRAM, so it's twice as fast. And DDR2 and DDR3 are newer versions of the old DDR. This and the RAM card are what to look for on the motherboard. DDR2 tells you how new the technology is, and 800 tells you the speed. Dual channel architecture doubles the amount of data sent to or from the RAM and gives you double the amount of data moving between the RAM and the CPU at that speed. Also, in dual channel RAM, there are 2 RAM connections to the CPU. If you buy dual channel RAM, you must make sure that they put into the right slots. Otherwise, they'll work as a single and not a dual channel. Maybe some of the memory will rub off on him.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have a dual channel. We would need a completely new motherboard for that. Okay, so now that our RAM is sorted, let's see what else we have here to plug into our expansion card. Oh, do you remember the chipset?
That had to do with bridges, didn't it?
Yes, well done, I'm impressed. The chipset is the South Bridge and the North Bridge. Now, the North Bridge controls your system bus that connects your RAM to your CPU.
And I even remember where it is. Here, under the heatsink, right next to the RAM and the CPU. Clever me, huh?
Yes, well done. The North Bridge also controls your AGP and your PCI Express slots.
I heard that new motherboards don't have AGP slots.
Well, I mean, some of them do and some of them don't. The reason some of the new systems don't have an AGP slot is because the PCI Express is a much better technology. But then, you know, some of the old guys want to use the old AGP graphics card on the new systems. That way, they want motherboards with both slots, just in case they want to upgrade from AGP to PCI Express. Now, don't forget, graphics cards can cost more than a whole new computer. Some motherboards have an onboard graphics controller, which doesn't cost extra. Then, standard graphics cards cost a few hundred rands, but higher-end graphics controllers can cost thousands of rands.
The accelerated graphics port, or AGP, only accepts controller cards for visual display devices like TVs and monitors. PCI Express is much faster and also supports cards for other devices. Hence, it's taking over from AGP and the old form of PCI, which uses the South Bridge controller. Now, the only reason that PCI still exists is to allow old PCI cards with slower speeds. So, for example, if you had a sound card which doesn't need increased speeds, that's why it's still around.
So the south bridge controls the expansion or external bus for slower devices, right?
Yes, very good. The external bus is for the peripherals. That's just a fancy word for saying input and output storage devices that get plugged into the system from outside the case. Although some of these devices are on the card. That's why the external bus is also called the I&O bus, which stands for input or output bus.
But what about the hard drive? It's usually fixed inside the case, but it also uses the external bus.
Yes, because you can also get external hard drives.
Okay, so some devices have their controllers on cards. Others have their circuitry built in on the motherboard. So how do we connect to these?
Well, we do that through PS2, USB, FireWire. Let's have a look at some of these.
There it is. Now, FireWire is used for the fast transfer of large amounts of data from or to a storage device. It's extremely fast, and data flows in a steady stream. It's used for things like watching a video from a camcorder, which is a digital video camera, or listening to music from an iPod or an external hard drive. But the device must be FireWire compatible. Also makes a nice necklace. These are the FireWire symbol. 2 FireWire ports, a small 4-pin and a bigger 6-pin connector. Another name for FireWire is IEEE 1394. The USB port connects a large variety of different USB-compatible peripheral devices. It can handle a mouse, a memory stick, and a printer, all from the same point. The latest USB technology is USB 2.0. But remember, a device that uses USB 2.0 wasn't around when they built the motherboard for the old USB. And as the USB port also supplies power for the devices connected to it, inventors have taken to designing pretty strange things for it, like coffee warmers and mini fans.
Shoo, Zamo, this dude was a lot of connecting, hey? I'm so tired. I'm starting to hear voices in my head now. I'll see you tomorrow.
Wait, I'm coming with you.
Let's go.
Okay guys, now that they've gone, here's what we looked at today. Whether we're building or upgrading a computer, we must know what type of CPU and RAM the motherboard supports. The CPU socket number must match the motherboard specification. The RAM card speed rating must match the motherboard specifications. DDR stands for double data rate, and dual channel RAM must be placed in the correct slot on a dual channel motherboard. This RAM allows double the amount of data to be sent at one time. For connection of input, output, and storage devices, some options are better than others. PCI Express is best for expansion cards for fast devices, whereas PCIe is fine for slower ones. FireWire is used for data streaming, for example, video, where there's a large amount of data to transfer. And USB 2.0 is great for most devices that need a fast connection. Now for today's task. Go into any computer store, look at the computer magazines or advertisements, and chat to people who know their motherboards, or use the internet if you have it. Compare motherboards and find out the specifications of a motherboard you would like to own. Then, write down the following details about it. Who is the manufacturer? What's the model number? What is the motherboard or system speed? What type of CPU will it support? What type of RAM will it support? Which slots does it have for expansion cards? How many USB and FireWire ports does it have? Well guys, another lesson has bit the dust. Don't forget, if you need some more information, you can always visit our website at www.mindset.co.za/learn. Until next time, good luck with the task, and I'll see you later. Bye.